Hey everybody, Cashew Paul here. If you recall, not too long ago we were in Bardstown, Kentucky at the Museum of Whiskey History. Well, today we're going to take a look at the opposite side of the coin. We've crossed the Ohio River, headed north, and now we're in Westerville, Ohio at the Anti-Saloon League Museum. We're going to talk with somebody here who's going to tell us what the Anti-Saloon League was all about and what role they played in Prohibition. So, without further ado, our story starts here. I know the view's obstructed with some of the trees, but this is the facade, the original facade of the Anti-Saloon League. And this is a group photo of the League taken on the south side of the building after Pussyfoot Johnson returned from England. And the furniture you see here, the barrister bookcases and the desk, is all original furniture from the League. And this is a bust of Reverend Howard Hyde Russell, who was the founder of the Anti-Saloon League. And because Prohibition did not affect any other part of the world, people would travel to the Caribbean where they could drink. It says pharmacies were a business that flourished during the 1920s as doctors wrote prescriptions for medicinal alcohol, which was allowed under the Volstead Act. If you recall from our visit to the Whiskey Museum, we saw copies of those prescriptions written. And here are two of the original signs. And the museum went to great lengths to be historically accurate, even down to the light fixtures. And today we're with Beth Weinhardt, and she is the manager of the Anti-Saloon League Museum. Beth, what can you tell me about the museum walking in if somebody had never been here before?
Well, we tell the story of the group that brought Prohibition to the country, the Anti-Saloon League. They came to Westerville in 1909, and they occupied this building where the museum is. And where the back parking lot of our library is, they built a large printing center. And they were very adept at their messaging. They printed 40 tons of anti-alcohol information a month and shipped it from Westerville. It made Westerville the smallest community in the United States to have a first-class post office. Let me show you some of the types of things they printed. They were very good at messaging about the evils of alcohol. This is an excellent example, Assaults and Drink. This was printed in 1913. You'll notice that they're using the color red to capture our attention, and they also use a lot of statistics on these flyers. I can't tell you whether these statistics are accurate, but they were a way to get their message across. And their message was interesting. So they're talking about assaults and drink, and as I said, this is 1913. And you know, when they do surveys of prisons today, they find that many of the people who are incarcerated have either alcohol or drug addiction problems. So they were pointing out that kind of thing. They were talking about the effects on the unborn child. Drinkers' children develop more slowly. And as, again, I want to point out, this is 1913. They talked about the effect on the mind, drink-impaired scholarship. So all of these things are talking about issues we talk about today. And they were talking about this in the lead-up to try to get the country to vote itself dry. And I like to refer to the ones I just showed you as appeals to our intellect, but they were very good at appealing to our emotions also. And They have one here. Profit, excessive death rate in drinking homes cost 2004, 407 children their lives. And there's a young girl laying on the altar of profit. And they're saying 36 states can stop this by constitutional amendment. There are others that are excellent also that I always like to point out. One is the full father and the empty stocking. And here the father's out drinking with his cronies at the saloon, and the young girl's left home alone. You'll notice that the plaster is off the wall. There's a broken pane that's been patched. She's got waif-thin legs, tattered clothing, and there on the mantel hangs her empty holiday stocking. A very powerful message about why people should not drink and the effects of drinking on the family. They also printed posters. Here's an excellent example of one of their posters. And it's begging the question, vote wet or vote dry? And here's the brewer, vote wet for my sake. He's got a diamond stick pin, fur collar in his coat, big car behind him, and he's identified as a brewer. And there's a woman simply dressed with young children, vote dry for mine, representing mothers. So this is the two things that are pitted against each other, the brewer against families. They were very good at this kind of messaging. So they printed posters, flyers. They had their own national and state editions of newspapers. And those newspapers would contain stories about the evils of alcohol. They would contain stories about their progress in different states across our country. And they would contain cartoons that would make the case for their cause also.
Was there any reason why it started here as opposed to, say, Philadelphia or New York?
Well, you know, it's interesting you should ask that, because really all three of the post-Civil War major temperance organizations had their roots in Ohio. But Ohio had also been an abolitionist state, and what you find is many of the people who were involved in that cause after the Civil War turned their attention to the dry cause. So you have the Prohibition Party, which had its first convention after the Civil War in Columbus, Ohio. You have the Women's Christian Temperance Union, which was founded out of a women's crusade that began in Washington Courthouse in Hillsborough, Ohio. And then you have the League, which was founded by Howard Hyde Russell in Oberlin, Ohio, in 1893. And it is the youngest of those three organizations, but they all do have their roots in Ohio, which is very interesting.
Do you think the opposition to Prohibition, they did not take them seriously? That's maybe why they had such a strong foothold, or was it because people really did see a problem with the drinking?
It may be a combination of those things. I mean, there was a drinking problem, although it had somewhat abated compared to what it was like in the 1830s and 1840s, by the time you get to the beginning of the 20th century. But there's still the issue of the father of the family drinking, the mother being dependent on his income to support herself and the family. Mm-hmm. And so that was definitely an issue. But what you have happening with the Anti-Saloon League that's different than other groups, that brings them the success that other groups did not have, is two things. And they're really two things that were the idea of this gentleman right here, the Reverend Howard Hyde Russell. He looked at the Prohibition Party and the WCTU, and he realized that both of them were proponents of a lot of different causes. They were pushing for fair labor laws. The WCTU, within a year of its formation, called for a 40-hour work week and a fair wage. And he felt that the only cause that organizations like the Anti-Saloon League or the WCTU or the Prohibition Party should be looking at is getting rid of the saloons. Because he really did believe, and his cohorts believe this also, that if they got rid of the saloon, they would cure all the ills of society. They would cure poverty and crime and disease and family dysfunction, and they would make a more perfect union. They would get rid of graft in government. And they were very sincere about this. So they were focused only on one issue, getting rid of the saloon. Not unlike groups today that are focused and vote on one issue, how they feel about one issue. And he really pushed that. And that made his group different. The other thing that made his group different, he looked at the Prohibition Party and he said, you know, Prohibition Party, I don't think you're ever going to be successful because third-party movements do not do that well in our country. And so he had a nonpartisan approach. He would support candidates who agreed with him regardless of their party. And so if two candidates were running in the fall and both of them agreed with him, he wouldn't throw his weight behind either one. He would just let it work its way out. If there was a candidate that was dry in the fall and one that was wet, of course he's going to support the dry candidate. If there are two wet candidates in the fall, he's going to find someone to run in the primary so his people have a choice in the fall. And using that nonpartisan approach, by the time we get to the late 19 teens, when the vote is being taken on prohibition, he has managed to stack most of the state legislatures in Congress with dry candidates.
Beth, can you tell me something about the publications? I noticed they had yearbooks and things. What was in the yearbook?
The yearbooks are fascinating. I'm going to pull one and show you. This is 1913. And so in this yearbook, they collect statistics for what's going on in every state in terms of the battle against alcohol in the saloon. And they had wet and dry maps. And this is the way they tracked their progress year by year. They would have one of these for each state. And this is something I referred to before about the white areas being dry, the urban areas with a lot of immigrants being dark. And in this one, they're also going to have one of those for the entire United States. And information on what they're doing to promote the cause state by state. And they had offices in each state. There were state leagues, and each of them had their own set of leadership. So these books tracked that. And they would print these annually. The other thing you're going to find, they had their own magazine called The American Patriot. So their newspaper was called The American Issue, and they printed both state and national issues of that. But here's The American Patriot. It's a magazine format. This is January 1913. It had things on different people in the league. It was more human interest stories. There would be some things on different countries and different states in the Union. Just a variety of like magazine articles with human interest. And this was printed for a couple of years in the 19 teens. They also printed their convention proceedings and bound those. That's what's down here. They would have a copy of every speech and every proceeding that happened and disseminate those. And some of them wrote books. So we have copies of some of their books. Howard Hyde Russell wrote a book called The Lawyer's Examination of the Bible. And he had been an attorney before he became a minister and founder of the League. And this is really one of my favorite publications that they did. This is called A Little Journey, and it's written for children, supposedly by a man who worked for the League and was out selling their publications. And it tells the story of the publishing house. It shows the machinery, and it shows the interior of the publishing center. It takes publication through every step, including how it folded the publication, and then the mailroom, how they were mailing it. So they even did their own publication on that.
Well, Beth, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today. And if anybody wants to come visit, what are your hours?
We are open Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. The only time we're closed during that time frame is we are closed for an hour for lunch on Saturdays between 1 and 2. The other thing, if people want to bring a group, we have a lot of groups come through here for a tour. You can contact us and we'd be glad to do something special for your group. A tour of the museum and even a walking tour, Prohibition walking tour through our uptown area, which many of the buildings date back to the 1880s and 1890s. It's really, a community that has embraced its heritage, and we have alcohol uptown now. That started in January of 2006. Before that, we were dry. It's an interesting story, not just the League.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
And here's another interesting item I found on my way out. Well, that was fantastic. If you're ever through the Westerville area, be sure to stop at the Anti-Saloon League Museum. Down in the comments below, tell me, what is your favorite alcoholic beverage? I'd like to thank Beth Weinhardt for her generosity of time and knowledge. It certainly made the experience all the more wonderful. If you liked the video, please click the subscribe button. Also, on my channel page, please click the bell icon and it will notify you when my next video comes out. If you would, click on the thumbs up button if you like the video. And if you'd like to subscribe to my channel, I have links down below for my Patreon page. So until next time, this is Cashew, signing off.